History has a deadly pattern, one that has killed every superpower for 500 years. And right now, that pattern is closing in on the United States. This is not a prediction. It's a countdown. It is as if we are reading from the same script. And this script once led former superpowers to disaster. In 1590, Spain was the world's wealthiest empire. It controlled half of the world's gold and silver. All of Europe was under its sway. Its currency was accepted everywhere in the world. Yet just 80 years later, it went bankrupt. And it never regained its former glory. In 1914, Britain was the largest empire in human history by territory. The so-called empire on which the sun never set referred to it. The British pound was the world's reserve currency. And this vast empire came to an end in just 40 years. In 1991, the Soviet Union was a superpower. It possessed nuclear weapons, global influence, and satellites around the world. But all this vanished in just 900 days. This was not due to any war, but to economic collapse. So these three superpowers all collapsed in the same way. And what comes next will frighten you. The United States has already completed 5 of the 7 stages. It is precisely following the old path of former superpowers. Today's video will show you how superpowers collapse, why every superpower believes it is exceptional, and why, judging by the data, it is now America's turn. Before understanding this pattern, you need to grasp what an empire's collapse really is. Not the textbook definition, but the reality. What does the destruction of a superpower mean? An empire's collapse does not start with war or military defeat. It begins with economic exhaustion. A superpower expands beyond its means to sustain itself, maintaining military bases in 150 countries, stationing troops on multiple fronts, making promises it cannot keep. But behind the scenes, major shifts are happening. Resources are misallocated. Productive capacity shrinks. Elite talent leaves the country. Then the decline process accelerates. Your allies begin to shift their stance. Enemies start testing your limits. The reserve currency status begins to waver. Suddenly, the advantages that once made you powerful become your weaknesses. The once highly sought-after currency starts flowing back home. The globally deployed military becomes unsustainable. Promises that once symbolized strength become empty slogans. This is not textbook theory. This is what actually happened to Spain, Britain, and the Soviet Union. They ended up that way because they made the exact same decisions the United States is making today. The United States believes its hegemony is eternal. It refuses to accept reality until the collapse reaches its peak. Now let's see how this played out 3 times. Starting with Spain. After Columbus discovered America in 1492, Spain became the first superpower. It conquered the Aztec and Inca empires, seized the world's largest gold and silver mines at the time. Starting from 1550, Spanish ships transported 200 tons of silver annually to the homeland. By 1600, that number doubled, reaching 400 tons. Spain controlled the money flow across Europe. The Spanish real was the global reserve currency. Everyone had to use Spanish silver. And the pattern starting point is when a country controls the currency. It begins to believe it is invincible. Philip II, who reigned from 1556 to 1598, was the world's wealthiest monarch at the time. He controlled all the wealth of the Spanish Empire. Yet he made fatal decisions. Stage 1. Military overextension. Spain fought wars everywhere. Against the Ottoman Empire in the Mediterranean. Against France and Italy in Europe. Suppressing Calvinist revolts in the Netherlands. Fighting the British Navy. And involved in the Philippines and the Americas. In 1580, Spanish troops were spread across 4 continents. Expenses were staggeringly high. Half of fiscal revenue was spent on the military. Yet it still could not make ends meet. Stage 2. Currency devaluation and loss of credibility. The Spanish government could not repay debts with taxes alone. So it made the common choice of all fallen empires, debasing the silver coinage by mixing it with copper. Originally pure silver coins were first mixed with 50% copper. Later increased to 75%. The face value remained the same, but the real value plummeted. By 1600, Spanish silver coins contained almost no silver. Merchants stopped accepting this currency. Inflation soared dramatically. Stage 3, the debt-death spiral. Spain began borrowing from Italian bankers, German bankers, and anyone willing to lend. In 1557, during Philip II's reign, Spain declared bankruptcy in less than a year. Unable to repay debts, it kept borrowing and spending. In 1560, 1575, and 1596, 4 times in 40 years, Spain went bankrupt. Each time it promised reforms, but each time it repeated the same mistakes, continuing to borrow. Stage 4, loss of productive capacity. This was something the Spanish completely failed to realize. When you have endless wealth, you stop producing. Why farm if you can import? Why build ships if you can buy them? Why innovate if money can solve everything? The Spanish elite considered all manual labor beneath their dignity. This led to manufacturing collapse, agricultural stagnation. All wealth was spent importing goods from abroad. Gold and silver from the Americas were used to buy French wine, Italian silk. Money flowed through Spain, but left no value behind. By 1600, Spain produced almost nothing, relying completely on imports. And when the silver mines' output began to decline, and eventually dried up, the entire system collapsed. Stage 5, societal collapse. As the economy deteriorated, crime rates rose. The streets of Madrid were full of beggars. Productive people began emigrating. The best talent flowed to France, Britain, and the Netherlands. These countries were thriving. Spain was left with bureaucrats, soldiers, and priests. No one was creating wealth. Everyone was consuming. In 1640, Spain lost Portugal. In 1650, it lost the Netherlands. By 1700, the Spanish Empire was an empty shell, a dead economic giant on the map. This former superpower declined in less than a century, and never recovered. Today's Spain is a culturally rich but globally insignificant European country. Its former conquering fortresses are now just tourist attractions. This is the fall of an empire. Fast forward 300 years to Britain in 1900, the empire on which the sun never set. At its peak, occupied 25% of the world's land area, ruled over 400 million people. The pound was the global reserve currency. All major trade contracts were settled in pounds. Central banks worldwide held British government bonds. London was the world's financial center. Just like Spain 300 years earlier, Britain believed this would last forever, but it had already embarked on the same trajectory. Stage 1, military overextension. In 1900, British influence spanned the globe: India, Africa, the Middle East, the Pacific, the Caribbean. Troops were deployed across 6 continents. Expenses were extremely high. When World War I broke out in 1914, Britain had 2 choices: remain neutral and watch Europe collapse, or enter the war and win at the cost of bankruptcy. They chose the latter. World War I cost Britain $40 billion, equivalent to $1 trillion today. It borrowed from everyone, most of it from the United States. By 1918, Britain went from being a creditor nation to a debtor nation, but it won the war. Stage 2, currency devaluation. The pound was originally backed by gold, but the war drained Britain's gold reserves. To exchange for food and supplies, Britain shipped gold to the United States. By 1920, Britain's gold reserves were half of what they were in 1914. Yet it still tried to maintain the pound's value. In 1925, Britain returned to the pre-war gold standard parity. But the problem was, the pound's exchange rate was set too high. This made British exports expensive. Manufacturing declined. Unemployment rose. To maintain the currency's value, the government had to keep interest rates high. This further devastated the domestic economy. By 1931, Britain could no longer hold on. It abandoned the gold standard. The pound depreciated 25% overnight. Stage 3, the debt-death spiral. Britain had not yet recovered from World War I. When World War II broke out, the war cost $120 billion. Britain again borrowed heavily from the United States. By 1945, Britain owed over $30 billion to the United States and Canada, more than Britain's GDP. Britain won the war, but the empire was finished. It could not maintain it, nor afford it. Stage 4, Imperial Disintegration. In 1947, Britain lost India. This was its pride, and its most profitable colony over the past 200 years. Over the next 20 years, Britain lost everything. By 1970, the British Empire existed only in history books. Stage 5, Reserve Currency Status Collapse. The pound's exchange rate kept falling. In 1940, £1 exchanged for $4.03. In 1950, for $2.80. In 1970, for $2.40. By 1980, it fell to $2.30. Today it exchanges for only $1.27. The global reserve currency became a regional currency. Britain tried to maintain status through its UN Security Council permanent seat, nuclear weapons, and its special relationship with the United States. But everyone knows the truth. It is now just a faded superstar without power, a museum of lost glory. The British Empire fell. Now let's look at the most recent example. The Soviet Union from 1945 to 1991. After World War II, the Soviet Union rose as a superpower. It possessed nuclear weapons, controlled Eastern Europe, had huge global influence, and even had satellites in space. The Soviet Union firmly believed it was the future, that communism would replace and bury capitalism. For 45 years, the Soviet Union confronted the United States. Its military matched America's. More tanks, more missiles, more troops. But behind the scenes, its economy was collapsing. Stage 1, Military overextension. The Soviet Union spent 15% to 20% of its GDP on the military, 3 times that of the United States. To match US technology, global influence, and alliance system, the Soviet Union intervened in Afghanistan, Cuba, Syria, Vietnam, North Korea, Angola, and Ethiopia. Wherever US influence reached, the Soviet Union had to follow. The cost of all this was unsustainable. Stage 2, Economic stagnation. In the 1970s, the Soviet economy stopped growing. Oil revenues had helped sustain it, but everything else was failing. By 1980, the Soviet Union even needed to import grain. This country with the world's most fertile land could not feed itself. Why? The failure of the planned economy. Innovation died under control. Without incentives, no one wanted to produce. The ruble never became a true international currency. It was not freely convertible internationally. Even Soviet citizens did not trust it. They preferred to use US dollars on the black market. The government had to use gold and oil to buy imports, because no one wanted rubles. In 1985, oil prices fell. The Soviet Union's gold reserves were quickly depleted. There was no real domestic currency circulation. Stage 4, Imperial disintegration. In 1989, the Berlin Wall fell. In 1990, Eastern Europe broke free from Soviet control. Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Romania, East Germany, almost all left within a year. The satellite states that once provided strategic depth for the Soviet Union all vanished. The Soviet government was powerless to stop it. The state treasury was also empty. Stage 5, Total collapse. On December 26, 1991, the Soviet Union dissolved. From the fall of the Berlin Wall to total collapse, it took only 900 days. No invasion, no war, simply because of economic crisis. The military could not be paid. The government could not function. The ruble became worthless. This superpower with 30.000 nuclear weapons collapsed due to internal economic failure. The pattern is exactly the same: overextension, currency collapse, the debt-death spiral, imperial disintegration, and finally, total collapse. The United States is following this pattern precisely, step by step. Let me show you the specifics. Stage 1, Military overextension. The United States has over 750 military bases in 80 countries. Troops are deployed in 150 countries. It defends Europe through NATO, defends Japan, South Korea, and the Philippines, fights in the Middle East, and counters Russia. The front lines are overstretched. The US military budget is $850 billion. more than the next 10 countries combined. But US weapons are aging. Recruitment rates are low. And it has made promises it cannot keep. If Russia enters NATO territory, if Iran blocks the Persian Gulf, the United States cannot handle all these scenarios simultaneously. The United States is bearing an excessive burden, just like Spain, Britain, and the Soviet Union did. Stage 2, currency devaluation. In 1971, Nixon closed the gold window. The dollar became a pure fiat currency. Since 2000, the money supply has increased by 400%. Since 2020, the US has printed over $6 trillion. Since 1971, the dollar's value has declined by 98%. Purchasing power has been lost. The United States did not debase its coins with copper like Spain. But it prints money without limit. The mechanism is different, but the result is the same. The essence is identical. Stage 3, US debt has reached $36 trillion, equivalent to 120% of GDP. Interest payments alone amount to $1 trillion annually. Interest expenditure now exceeds defense spending. The US economy runs a deficit year after year. The 2024 deficit reached $1.8 trillion. To repay old debt, the United States must continuously borrow new debt. This is the core definition of a debt-death spiral. Historically, Spain defaulted on debt 4 times. Britain borrowed until its empire crumbled. The Soviet Union exhausted all its wealth and then dissolved. And the United States is now repeating their mistakes. Stage 4, loss of productive capacity. Today's United States is addicted to speculation and consumption. It consumes without producing. The manufacturing base has vanished. It moved to China, Mexico, and Vietnam. The US imports over $800 billion in goods annually. Nearly everything relies on imports: pharmaceuticals, electronics, steel, even components for military equipment. Just as Spain relied on imports while silver flowed out, the United States relies on imports. Dollars are flowing out. Stage 5, societal collapse. Americans' trust in institutions is at a historic low. Crime rates are rising. Homelessness is surging. 100,000 Americans die from drug overdoses each year. Elite talent is leaving the United States for other countries. Birth rates are falling. Political chaos is evident. Americans cannot agree on anything. They cannot fix anything, nor build anything for themselves. Signs of collapse are everywhere. But everyone pretends everything is fine. It is not. The United States has already entered Stage 5, and after the Soviet Union entered Stage 5, it collapsed completely very quickly. Britain and Spain experienced similar stages. The pattern never changes. Stage 6, loss of reserve currency status. When your neighbors start diversifying, switching to other currencies in trade, when dollars start flowing back, because people no longer need to hold them. We are already seeing these signs. The BRICS nations are developing alternative currencies. Central banks are buying gold. China and Russia are trading in yuan and rubles. Saudi Arabia is starting to accept yuan for oil. The situation is very fragile. Stage 7, total collapse. This is not a gradual decline, but a sudden, total collapse. The Soviet Union went from superpower to non-existence in 900 days. Britain lost its empire in 20 years. Spain took a bit longer. But the outcome was the same. When the reserve currency collapses, borrowing becomes impossible. When the military cannot be funded, the collapse will not be graceful. It will happen quickly and terribly. Every superpower thinks this won't happen to it. They all made the same mistakes as other empires. Spain, Britain, the Soviet Union, and the United States all believed they were exceptional. They all believed the rules didn't apply to them. But they were always wrong. You cannot spend beyond your means. Without productive capacity, you cannot sustain an empire. You cannot print money indefinitely without consequences. A currency cannot devalue forever. Once you complete stages 1 through 5, you cannot escape stages 6 and 7. The sequence is predetermined. It is only a matter of time. The United States may have 10 years, 5 years, or even less. But the pattern indicates collapse is inevitable. And it will not be a slow process. It will happen suddenly. This is today's video. If you liked it, please help me by going to the Douyin Jingxuan app and clicking the recommendation thumbs up button at the bottom right, so more people can learn from